on the East Coast who are joining at, what time is it? 2 a.m. Welcome. Tom, I'm gonna update that picture somehow on my own. I'm gonna your profile picture in the. Brian, are you you're fully connected at this point?
Hello.
All right, we can hear you. All right, I'm going to get this started. Only 1 minute late.
Somebody's muted. Maybe I'm muted.
You're not muted.
Okay, I hear you.
And we can hear you.
No. I couldn't hear you. Just making sure it's working.
All right, this is the NFSV4 meeting. If you're expecting something else, stay around anyway. Come on, at least scan the QR code. All right, try. All right.
I think we should start serving cookies.
That's a good idea. All right, this is the Notewell. It's Tuesday.
Coffee, what report?
I'll leave this up for a moment for, as I'm instructed to do. I will not try and interpret it for you. They told me I'm not a lawyer, and they were correct. Note really well. I'm also not going to interpret this for you, but obviously one of the chair's jobs, police behavior, so please be nice so that I don't have to do that. Yeah. Meeting tips. Yes, I used the slide template. That's why you're seeing these again. Okay. Agenda. So we're at the chair's welcome part. Welcome, everybody. We'll touch on the agenda in a moment with some bashing, which has already happened and slides are uploaded. This is generally what's on deck. If anybody would like to add more topics, there's likely time. I did not put time limits in, so I think we're going to be fine. Most of the early parts are going to be kind of co-chair status, and they will not be too long. Okay, nothing heard? Yeah, I didn't do the agenda update for your stuff, but that was the comment of it's already been bashed and your deck is in there, but you're going to be at the end. Still shouldn't be a problem time-wise. Okay, so since last meeting, published 9737. So layout returned. We have 2 in the queue. So extending the opening of files, layout WCCC. Those are either in RFC edit or queued for RFC edit.
No, the Delstead is an auth 48 as of this morning.
Oh, that's correct. Sorry, I did see that. This is a slide deck I did more than 1 day in advance. So that's right. So Delstead is in auth 48, although there was a significant set of RFC editor comments to it. So I expect that to take. sorry. All the comments have been addressed, Tom says from the room. So I appreciate that. It was a pretty interesting style choice. So there was a lot of, just to complete the conversation, since we're having a minor conversation without everybody else being able to follow, because they probably didn't see the email that was to chairs and authors. There was a lot of references to NFS, kind of operations, and then had an open paren reference to the document that had the operation, but the RFC editor that went on for a bit thought maybe we should just have a reference block to those someplace else. Working group doc still in there. There's the BIS document. Recently expired internationalization. We're going to try and motivate a conclusion to have the conversation of, are we going to continue to support version 4.0 or not, and be able to unblock that and revive it. Others that are recent, there's still Rick's ACL's document, Ackles document, and also there's the Novak kind of ACLs. Those two don't particularly align to the best of my knowledge. There's erasure encoding. We'll see that, even though it's not on the agenda. That's the bash from Tom. We'll see an update to that topic. And there's the security document that wasn't adopted by the group, but we'll have a bit of a conversation about that document as well. Comments? Anybody? Last chance to bash the agenda. Oh, that is the wrong thing. No. Okay. All right. So this is some work that the chairs put in trying to kind of build a map of the RFCs that make up NFS. And there's, since the last time the ADs saw it, there's some very minor tweaks. The ADs have seen this. But I want to use this to kind of motivate some amount of conversation about the version 4.0 question. And are we going to continue to maintain that? And part of that conversation was, at least the chair, who hasn't been in here for a million years, really kind of wanted to understand, well, what are we really talking about when we mean, if we deprecate or kind of mark version 4.0, not 4.1, not 4.2, but 4.0 as, say, historic at this point. And there are still implementations out there. I acknowledge kind of all of those things, but that we're not going to necessarily do maintenance updates to it. And so I kind of mapped them out. Obviously, this is the eye chart version of this. Don't try and read that. It'll get broken apart and seen. I should get, oh, you are in the queue. Look at that. I'll give you a second right after I kind of say, but the key, I'm not going to reproduce this key at all. So that's the key that will matter for the other slides. Go ahead, Tom.
So just a question, is V3 historical, or is it?
So V3 is not under IETF change control. So it is really kind of a reference to a corporate standard, and therefore the IETF.
I was just thinking it's an example for 4.0 to follow. Well.
Yeah, so we didn't have to market that in that it's informational.
Okay.
Okay, so this is kind of the easy parts. So these are all in there. The requirements are in the kind of yellow boxes. There's some miscellaneous ones up there. There's some namespace database and federated ones. I didn't really know how to really tie them to what the state of, and so I'm happily willing to kind of take some feedback, but this isn't necessarily the slide that we'll get to the last slide, which is the most interesting. So this kind of shows, the green ones, you have some IO stuff there. You can see kind of the dependencies, the XDR. You can see that there's an old version that's deprecated now, and it's 4506 for the XDR representation. Again, nothing controversial here. This is maybe just informative. All right. And remember, this is all motivated by what are we going to do with 4.0? And now here's the crazy slide. So I labeled version 4.0, version 4.1, and version 4.2. I would like for, in the future, for people to actually put the, all of them are actually just generally labeled Network File System version 4 protocol as the title of the draft, leaving poor helpless chairs confused. So this is kind of what the map looks like. And so one of the things you can see here is that there's not an easy version of saying what's deprecatable and what's not. 4.0, and this will get into the BIS question in general, because if I'm not mistaken, what do we have BIS on? It's 5661, which is not the latest in the chain. But it is kind of the root of 4.1 and 4.2.
I mean, that's what I wanted the map for, right? Just to explain where 8881 fits into this, right? And 5661 is going to obsolete a bunch of docs, including 8881.
So the BIS document.
But this document, yes, thank you. Sorry,
would potentially obsolete that. Richard?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I don't know if deprecating or obsoleting these standards is the right procedural way forward. After all, commercial customers are still using NFS version 4, 4.1, 4.2, whatever, and indicating to them that they are using an obsolete standard has implications. Usually, when there's no work to be done anymore on an RFC standard, you just leave it as is, but you deprecate or you make them historic only after there's basically nobody using it anymore. And I don't think that this can be said at this moment for NFS version 4.0, nor for version 4.1.
Can I jump in? Chris, you're going to jump in and explain what our problem is?
Yeah, so our no, Brian, you do it actually.
Okay, I believe our problem is, Richard, that the question is whether we are going to actually change the 4.0 specification to reflect changes in internationalization and require people to update 4.0. And that's what we don't want to do. Because people are using 4.0 and they've been using it for years on stable implementations, and we don't want to go out there and ask people to change something that's basically in maintenance mode. They just don't want to touch it. See what I mean? It's a protocol thing, not a. We don't want to trigger an implementation change requirement for 4.0.
True, but I'm still a little bit unsure why this needs to be reflected in an IETF status change of the document.
Because the internationalization spec references 4.0 and asks it to make changes.
Okay.
And that's what we don't want. It's another spec affecting 4.0. And Chris, tell me if I'm way off base. I'm trying to simplify this. We just don't want to trigger a moment with 4.0 because of a new document coming out cleaning up internationalization.
I mean,
just leave it as it.
Beg the question of what is a 4.0 implementation.
Right.
And so, for example, Mac OS has 4.0. It's not exactly a 4.0 client, but it's 4.0. But they're almost certainly not going to do the internationalization update. And the question then becomes, okay, if we did the internationalization draft, what would we apply it to? is the ones
Right,
that
but
are,
that's a question for the internalization draft, not necessarily so much for the existing spec for 4.0, right?
we kind of want to make a statement that says we're not going to do
Any
other
more work on?
any more updates to 4.0. Not that people won't still use it.
Yeah, but still, I'm not sure if the IETF status of the document is the right way to reflect that.
Okay.
But maybe one of the current and upcoming AD have some more thoughts on that.
The upcoming AD doesn't know exactly what to say. However, the working group chooses what it needs to work on. I mean, the document status and what the charter and milestones are two different things. So if you set your milestones to say, this is what we work on, and that's what the people agree to work on, then that's what the chairs maintain, and that's how they'll admit documents. So we don't have to take new work. So maybe obsoleting is okay if you understand what that means for this particular series of documents. The IETF isn't really totally consistent on what an old spec is. So we have labels, but if you don't think that they apply, we can still confine the work to work on the area where we need to do work rather than maintain everything. Does that help?
I think I'm comfortable. It's a question for me about what are implementers out there really going to accept. That's really where the chairs are trying to figure out. I mean, we've heard from the Linux community that they're not going to do any updates that from their, if you put in spec 4.0, they're not going to take those updates. They might take them in 4.1, much more likely to, it'll hit the 4.2 variant. 4.1. Okay. Right. And so, sorry, the chair was corrected from the audience. Thank you, Tom. And so that's the kind of question, right? And we have feedback from some implementers, but maybe not the full universe of them.
Well, let's make sure we maintain the latest, and let's use our time carefully in considering other stuff, because it consumes cycles and time, and it's maybe not productive for this group to do it. All that spiel was Gori Fairhurst speaking as an individual incoming AD.
Yeah. So, as I said, the working group decides what documents to work on. There's always a different way. If you have an upcoming draft that is no longer shouldn't be applicable because nobody wants to spend the time and cycles to apply it to very old specs, you can always say in the new document that this won't update the old stuff. I'm just my feeling is that it's too soon from a document status perspective to deprecate or put those NFS version 4 documents as historic. Again, it's inconsistency, but on the other hand, from a commercial perspective, I don't think that it's already that we are in a state where nobody is going to deploy any new environments with NFS version 4.0 anymore. But putting the status of the document, changing the status to historic, that has implications outside of the IETF as well.
Yes. So the map is also supposed to enable us to think about if we do want to make such a statement, and it could be draft by draft. So think of it either way. This is some attempt at the dependency chain. That is the set of drafts for NFS 4.0, 4.1, 4.2. And so it doesn't look as 4.0 does seem to be somewhat contained. That said, there's a lot of the drafts that are kind of pointed to the coming off of 4.1 that actually mention version 3, version 4.0, and version 4.1. And it's not terribly clear there's no extensions to version 3, but it's also not clear that they're scoped to say only 4.1. And so if we were going to say something about we're not going to support 4.0, we would have to craft some statement. And it might be that even if we're doing it draft by draft, maybe that makes sense that we have some language we can reuse when we want to do that. And that's what the chairs are asking the working group of, how do we proceed? I think the internationalization work is probably needed. I understand there's a bunch of implementations that probably, client-wise in particular, probably aren't going to do that work. And so the question becomes, how do we, what's the set of language to do that? How do we unblock some of these things and move forward?
So one of the things I've been seeing lately is that I've been getting editorial reviews, both when we request for comments, and then also when we go to the editorial queue, they're asking me to clarify that. Right? Is this 4.1? Is this 4.2? And I'll admit I've been lax at it, because in my mind, 4.2 is an optional feature to 4.1. If you have one, you have the other. And so that's where some of that clarity has been needed. And we'll just have to be careful going forward on our documents to say, this is a 4.2 extension, not a 4.1 extension, and not a 4.0 extension.
I'll also say, I've talked to, with a different hat on, I'm a chair in the SEC area as well. And I've talked to the SEC ADs, and they're somewhat confused in our documents in general of, wait, how does this, what is the security of this? How does this thing work? And at least one of the recent drafts was a head scratcher for them. They said yes, but they would love for us to provide, even just to the IESG, some kind of understanding of, help us understand what the model is of where security of the protocol is, right? Because it's not in the NFS, it's in the RPC, it's in those other layers. There's a lot of confusion at the IESG when they look at our update drafts. So both understanding what the minor, what an extension applies to minor revision level, and something that says there's not really a big security consideration section in here, because that's a completely different layer of what's going on, would be helpful to make our documents easier to digest from the IESG. So I guess I'd like to ask, sorry, I have both Christoph and Zahed in the queue. Zahed, do you want to jump the line? Or?
No, Christoph, go ahead. I'm going to reply to your security thing. So, but anyway, Christoph, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I'll start with the last thing. So what Chris just said, I think an architecture document, how all the layers tie together, is probably a very useful thing, not just for the IESG, but also for casual readers of the standards. So violent agreement there. But let's go back to what I originally raised the hands for. And Tom kind of pointed to it. The whole way we've done versions is just problematic, and I think we need to fix it. I just don't know what the fix is, right? So we have 4.0, which everyone agrees is some kind of obsolete, not necessarily IETF obsolete. Then we have 4.1, which is basically a completely different protocol. And then we have 4.2, which is a small set of extensions to 4.1. And these like 4.0, 4.1, 4.2, which are completely different things, and no one knows what to extend. We need to sort that out. We need to figure out what the stream is for extensions to the 4.1/4.2 protocol that everyone's been actively working on for the last 10 plus years. And make sure this is actually one development stream, and either figure out how to finally move everyone to 4.2. I don't know how. Or figure out a way that we just turn 4.2 into yet more extensions to 4.1 and kind of give up on the versioning. But we need some settlement there. And I really don't know the answer, but I think this is kind of the most urgent thing we need to sort out at the architectural scale.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Christoph. I think you said a couple of things that I wanted to say also. So to start with the security things, I think we talked about it before, and I told this working group like, hey, if you guys give me a good understanding of like how the security and other layer is good enough for NFSV4, so that NFSV4 itself doesn't need to do it, and we can convince the ISG or others to actually we can convince us, the working group and the ISG, to drop the security work that we have been prolonging for so long time. We can do a minimum set of security things, a security document like how to make NFSV4 secure, not really changing the protocol, but saying like let's do it in another layer. That's possible. And actually exactly the you talked with the security IDs, those are your colleagues, but I also talked with the security IDs and others, and they were like, okay, that's fine. There could be protocols like, okay, hey, we can say like, you know what, this is the protocol. You want to make it secure, just use TLS. We have those kind of protocols in IETF, so it's not the case. The history of like this working group taking on security protocol, basically the ISG, some ISG, they want them to, okay, we're going to do this, but promise that you will deliver on security. Now we're trying to do security, and we kind of solved in the implementation, we solved the security in a different layer, different way. We can just document that one, those kind of things, like this is how it's done and it's good enough for us, and I think we're fine with that one, and that could be that we can sell, that I know we can sell. As long as I was in the ISG, I talked with my colleagues that can fly. So you wanna say something on that?
Well, yeah. So there's a security presentation about status of the security document
exactly.
and the way to do that, and so we will come back to this conversation.
Yeah, so I know that, but this is just like as you brought it up now, so I'm saying that.
Yeah.
And this also like the things like, so if the maintainers and implementers of our SMSV says like, hey, version 4.0 is nobody's doing it, or like we're not going to extend it, or we're going to improve it, we can come to IETF. We don't need to make it history. We can just put it in a like we don't need to make it obsolete. It can be there, just don't refer to it anymore. It could be there, right? And then between the NFSV 4.1 and 4.2 and 4.1, as I understand so far, my understanding, this is the major thing. And 4.2 extension and all these things, we don't need to merge them. That could be two separate things. But when you are doing extending, let's not refer to NFSV3, NFSV 4.0, because we know, even if this naming convention is kind of like we screwed up a bit. We should have said like 4. Version 5 instead of 4.1. But anyway, we don't need to do that. So what we need to do is like stop referring to 4.0, start referring to NFSV 3, which is not we don't do anymore, I guess. So don't care about that one. And if you this working group decide on like this is the way going forward, you can solve it. So what's in the name? I don't think like there is anything in the name. As long as I just want to know like what is out there that people are implementing and using, what is the base, and how do you extend those things, and we should be reflecting this. So if there is a protocol or version name that nobody uses, nobody cares, we can forget about that one, and we can keep it alive. We don't need to decide historic thing, because there, I mean, we tried to do this 793 TCP history. People are saying, hey, you cannot do that because it has implications. And if it's V4 might have also implications. Don't put it in history. Don't obsolete it, because the moment you obsolete by something, you don't need to do that. So keep it. Don't refer to, just refer to 4.1, 4.2, and then maybe next time if you guys do a major versioning, change the version number.
I think one of the things that's lost here is we need a line in the sand that we're not doing 4.0. We need it documented because there is someone in the group who thinks that we will continue working on 4.0 if it's not written down that we're not this that point. And then Christoph had asked about how to.
Can I ask just about that note? Would people think a charter modification that kind of gives a little bit of clarity, but doesn't necessarily make a "we'll never touch it again" statement sufficient?
Yeah.
General nods of yes in the room for the notes.
And then Christoph had asked a question. Go ahead, Gory.
So, Gory, I love the idea of changing the charter. You have to agree some text between you, which works. And it doesn't have to condemn you never to touch something, but saying this is the focus and this is what you will be maintaining would be super helpful for me because I'm a newbie here and I don't have a clue about these millions of RFCs. Well, I do. I remember the NFSV4, but that's not very helpful, is it?
Yes.
And so the other comment was Christoph had asked how we make 4.1 and 4.2 go forward. We make a 4.3 that says all of 4.2 is now mandatory because right now it's all optional. So as soon as 4.3 comes out, 4.2 is now a required implementation that people have to go do. It may not be the answer you want to hear, but there is a way forward. Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm here to help you guys make progress, not put my stamp on things.
Sorry, Jahid again. Yeah, work on a BIS version, merge them all together, make it a V3, V4.3 or something like that. That could work. I mean, you can always work on BIS, and that BIS can obsolete or like update other things, right? So
Yeah.
that we have been doing. I mean, this is what we did for TCP also. Like one of the authors are sitting here. Like we took all the experience that we had from TCP, make it even moderner, and published it, and basically obsoleted the previous one. That could be exactly, we can do that here.
We'll bring this conversation to the list, and I mean, we will have to look at what our charter is, and it might be, that's a definite possibility, I think. But stay tuned. There's no, I'm very, as a chair, I think Brian, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn for Brian, my co-chair either. Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're very open to, how to resolve this so that we don't get drafts that divide the working group as to, should we do this? Should we not do this? I think everybody needs to get on that same page, and let's write it down and be on that same page. The advertisement, if you want that mess of a dot file, you can have it and make your own unimpressive pictures. All right, moving on. I don't know if I'm going completely in order, but we're going to go with security. This is going to be pretty short and sweet. We would like to, at least without the chair hat on, I would like to make sure this effort kind of gains traction. With a chair hat on, I still want to see the security document proceed. There are some really low-hanging fruit kind of things we could do in a much slimmed down security document. Right now, we say in the security of NFS that Kerberos is the one true way. We could at least say you can use TLS as well for transport security. We said we would do that document, but we never wrote it. So that said, the Novak security document is expired. I'm still tracking it. However, it's a large XML document with lots of author comments. This shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. The plan is still the plan we talked about, I don't know, a few interim meetings ago, to move it into Markdown and put it in GitHub. I am still working on that converter. I made some more progress this week. And in fact, the version, Tom, that I sent you, I have some updates for you already. Christoph had volunteered to help when it was in GitHub. Others will be welcome. I'm not pressing anyone. Christoph, you don't need to say, hey, I'm still there. You don't, no comments are needed. Wait until we actually get a document in GitHub to comment, but that's kind of the direction still. I still believe we need that. When we figure out the conclusion of the previous conversation, the security document's going to follow along in that vein, is my intention. So I'm not looking for any, it's just kind of a status update, not an adoption call at this point, and open to feedback. There doesn't have to be any, we can progress, but any comments on that approach, happy to hear them. All right. And Brian, I'm going to put you up, and then we're going to transition to Tom's erasure coding. Brian, do you want control, or do you just want to tell me to go next?
I'm going to tell you to go next, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You can hear me? My dinner is resting on top of my speaker. And my...
You're coming through clear here.
Oh, good. I'm coming through a thali dinner. Okay. So, seeking closure on the RFC 5661 BIS document. You saw Chris's map that tries to explain what that effort is in relation to the other documents. Essentially, this is the 4.1 document. Ignore the numbering. 4.1 is the core protocol that introduced a working minor versioning approach for NFS, on which 4.2 was built. So if you look at the two documents, if you look at 4.1, throw away the numbers. You look at 4.1, big document. And if you look at 4.2, much smaller document because it's an increment over 4.1. And that was the intention of the 4.1 document. 5661 BIS did split out, as I think Chris was trying to point out. 561 BIS modified 5661 to split out security and internationalization from the core document to make it a common document across protocols. So 5661 BIS, the update is been further reduced to an actual core document and separated out security and internationalization, I think for a very practical reason, in that those conversations are very area specific and very much touch on a standard approach within the IETF in ways that the core NFS protocol does not. So I think that's been a very helpful factoring for discussions with other people within the IETF. You don't have to look at this gigantic whale, just, take a dolphin or two, okay? So I don't know if that's appropriate analogy. We'll go next slide. I want to talk about this. So we've been going since before 2020. And that date is sort of important in that the reason we're doing 5661 BIS rather than 8881, which is the update to 4.1, is that the effort to do the correction started before 8881 was approved. Okay, go back in time. 8881 is the, am I getting this right? 8881 is the, I don't have my documents.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, 8881 is the current 4.1 document. But the actual BIS document work started before the approval of 8881, so we weren't actually going to do a BIS document on something that was going through the approval process. So Dave started with 661 BIS, 5661 to go to the BIS document. So 5661 BIS subsumes 5661 and 8881. Very important. So don't worry about 8881. Sort of like we can drop the numbers and talk about 4.1 at this point. So this is the BIS update to 4.1. The document, and when I look at the PDF, because I had a basis in something. The document is latest draft is 09 from 2024, from October 2024. So that's approaching 5 years of effort on this document. It's my long-term, my short-term goal. My long-term goal seems to have been satisfied by this. My short-term goal is to bring this to closure. So the current document is 658 pages long. If you study it, you will see that in the document, 41 pages of the 658 pages is a concentrated discussion on the changes in the document and the state of the document incorporating the fixes asked for by the changes or resolution of whether a problem is a problem or not. So I'm trying to look at how big a problem this is. So, and then on top of the changes in the appendices, if you read the document, you're going to see a lot of inline discussion in the document that I would call as not normative text. It will not be there when we publish the document. It'll be removed because it is further discussion of the changes being discussed in the appendices. And that, I think, is a problem because we're looking to decide whether to adopt the document into the working group. And I don't think the state of the document is lending itself to that decision. Next slide. Larry talked about the split of it. The state of 5661 BIS, the document that stands today, it is a nearly finished draft of the core 4.1 specification. Make no mistake about it, Dave put a lot of work into this. And the areas that need to be closed are there. But I want to move it into a different state to drive closure on this item. Next slide. So this is sort of a variation on something I brought up a long time ago. And was actually sort of what was done for the security document, the second item. What I want to do is go through the document and basically clean up the document to be a pure protocol specification for adoption by the working group. It is still an individual draft, which means taking all of the inline discussion out of the document, consolidating it with the change discussion of the appendices, separating out the appendices to a separate tracking document, which is the working group work remaining to be done, and really, really clarify what is on the table, and convert that tracking document from the pure specification that would be considered for adoption to a punch down list of the remaining items to address. And then the final thing I'd ask for that I wanted to pursue before was to triage that list and just focus the working group time. I mean, I don't think I need working group consensus for a typo fix. And I don't think I want to take it to the mail list. However, I do want to take a potential protocol over the wire change, which I think is still a little bit unclear in the document of what is there and what is not. And I want to basically reduce the document to a protocol spec for adoption. Not to say it necessarily will be adopted by the working group, but have a triage list identifying those areas that have are, I think, have been sort of niggling at us, but we're unclear as the status of what the actual proposals are in the BIS document. Chris, I'd mentioned this a long time ago. This is sort of what I am proposing for driving this to closure. And I'm not sure what I want to do next year. I think this has to be done regardless of whether anybody wants me to or not, actually. Is there, I don't think there's anything else.
So thanks for the last slide. My whole problem with this whole work has been we have interim meetings where we rehash that we have topics to discuss. We don't discuss the topics. We don't punch list them. We don't bring it down. And we need to do that if we're going to go forward with this. And we also have to put it in version control. We can't keep on going forward with documents not in version control. Right? I mean, this is another one that there's people willing to give some time to this if the stuff is in version control and not in someone's hands where they won't share.
Yeah, and on the version control stuff, moving to a clean document, a cleaned up document, which is the protocol proposal, and then the factored out change list, what's been done, what's remaining, and triage list. I am really I don't want to pull the trigger on this unless I have the ability to somehow track changes in the document. So then we punch down something, we know exactly what's changed that cleared that item. So I can relate, so a comment can be related to, I made this change because this removed item 61 from the punch down list, right? And if I can't get to there, then I won't be able to manage this process. It won't be any better than what we've been doing. So the work that Chris has been doing and trying to basically get everything under Git, that's the only reason I'm thinking this is now, maybe this idea is a lot more feasible now than it was before when we first discussed it a while back. That's responding to Tom Haynes. So I think the next step for me is to give a timeline and a plan for this, and talk to Chris about when I can put this under change control so that I can take the current 09 document and then do the factoring. And then we can do the tracking. Can we do that, Chris?
Yep. Yeah, I'm making progress. I mean, turns out I have a day job and they expect things of me too.
Oh, yeah, no, you're not.
No, I know.
You're not holding me up. But, and I can start redlining the document virtually on what I want to separate out. I've been staring at it and kind of on a tablet and looking to circle stuff, and just need to pull out the chainsaw, rough frame it, and then get the finer tools to do the actual work.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this closure steps looks good. Moving using GitHub, great. Who will be the editor?
I don't know that we have an answer to that yet.
Who will be the editor of the document?
Yep.
I would.
Oh, that's great. Because it seems like one of the issue with this working group has been like the editor's role plays a huge influence on like how everybody here works together or not work together. So I mean, having somebody who has time, passion to drive this thing should be the editor. And I would ask the chairs to actually at least have 2 editors so that they can back up each other. These are huge documents. This is a one slide has I can see like this is a huge task. This is one slide in some huge text. To get 2 editors, they can complement each other, to look into different things. Because when you go into the GitHub mode of working, you'll have issues. There will be number of issues, a number of sectional number of issues. They can be resolved parallelly, and the peers can be merged parallelly, and editors can actually divide themselves to pull in all the peers at their own pace, doesn't need to wait for a single editor to do all the things. This is what we are trying to do in MOQ also, because they have the same thing. One editor is too much for them. And I have also other working group realizing the same thing. So having 2 editors, I think would be great. So Brian, if you're one of the editor, that's great. But I think you need a backup.
I would love to do that. We will work hard to recruit that, but I don't know that I have we need to get the document in a condition where it can be in a GitHub workflow type of thing. And then I think it's time to try and figure out who that second editor can be.
My working theory here is that let's do the split separation and change control, and then ask somebody to join the effort, not have them look at the current document and go, what do we do next? Okay. Tom, you're out of focus, but that's okay.
Oh, okay, there's my glasses. Yeah, so we did this with 3530 BIS, where we didn't have 2 editors, but we had it in change control, and that's the only thing that made it possible, right? So with this, even if you don't get it in Markdown, split the document into, go get version 8, go get version 9 and check those in, and at least you'll have some clue as what's changing, right? But if it's not in any form of version control, it's dead to me.
Yeah. So there is actually a version of the BIS document in version control. I'm pretty sure it's the BIS and not the security document. Yeah, I did it. I tried to do it. I tried to work with Dave on it, and then Dave just kept handing me more.
3530 BIS is why I won't work on this, because that was huge.
Okay. All right. Well, let me get a plan to the mail list, and I'll put Chris. You and I will talk before anything goes out there.
Yep.
And maybe the ADs too. I'll get some feedback on approach.
All right, Tom. And now for something completely different.
X marks the spot. Sorry for the voice. 20 hours on an airplane killed me. So it's erasure coding, not encoding. I made that mistake in the past.
Did I?
Yes. And that's why I knew, because I made a mistake. So the problem with erasure coding is, this is like the 3rd or 4th meeting that I've talked about it, is that I get away from here and everyone has lost sight of what are we trying to do, including myself. So can we proceed, please?
Mm-hmm.
Last time we had at 120 we had a very bad feedback. At 121 we had a positive feedback. And I went from 121 and I started giving some sorry.
You're supposed
This?
to. Yeah, hold on. I have to give you control somehow.
And after 121, in the interim meetings, I provided more feedback, or this slide was from an interim meeting, and we started regressing after that. So, do I have control?
Probably not yet. I can't. There's a chair's conversation about where this button is to give you control, and I can't remember where it is.
All right. So now we're at 122, and what's the reality? The reality is we haven't progressed, and I think it's because the use cases aren't well presented, and I also think it's because the solutions that I've given, and I've given like 5 or 6 different ones in different meetings, they don't, or they've been presented to me as well, they don't scale well with the use cases we have, or they don't scale well with what a traditional kernel-bound server would do. And so we have when you do an erasure coding, you take a data block and you convert it into a chunk. The chunk might be the same size as the data block, or it might be smaller depending on how you're coding it. And so the chunk size will not be the size of the data block. The data block won't be the size of what you send on the wire. and what you send in the wire might not be the size of the disk. I said segments, but that's the wrong word. What's on the disk? The button is working.
I figured it out.
So what's really at besides performance, what's really at the center of what I'm trying to solve, and that is what happens when during a write there's a power cut, and the power cut could be a power failure on the client, it could be a network interruption, or it could be a server crash. And notice when I say server crash, I actually mean when we're writing to not the metadata server, but the data servers. Let's say there's 8 data servers. I have to account for all 8 of those getting the writes in order and saving them at the same time. And if any one of those goes down, that might violate the constraints that the erasure coding has provided for safety. So in this scenario, we have to either recover the original data or we have to recover the new data, but we have to be consistent. Every data server has to agree that we've recovered the same set of data. That just gets worse when we have multiple clients writing to the same file, because now we have to say, do I recover the original data? Do I recover the data from client 1, or do I recover the data from client 2? And then that's only in the 2 client scenario. We can have more clients, and they could all be writing in the same area. So those are the fundamentals of the issue. There are 3 use cases we've identified: a single writer, multiple reader. The case is what happens when the single writer overwrites already written data and has a power cut. What do we go for? Multiple writers, not much contention. I'll talk about block alignment in a moment. And then multiple writers, multiple contention. You know, there's different algorithms we can employ, but we need to be fast. So, and then some of the things to remember here is we're looking at maybe 64,000 clients, 64K thousand clients. We're trying to replace Luster and checkpointing. Checkpointing is where an application, say an AI application, is running on 64,000 clients. They all decide to save their state such that if they die, someone can continue from where they had left off. So they're all hitting a file to say, here's my state, and save it. So one of the solutions, so I'm not going to talk about any of the solutions I proposed at 121 or before, but the solution I walked away from 121 was swap files. And that was every client got a swap file. And I was really good with this until I thought, well, how many swap files do we have on the data server? And that's going to be how many clients we have. And then I lost interest in this. So we would go by using a native file system to clone the active file to a swap file, update the clone, and then atomically swap them back in. And there's many variants of this. And besides the fact of each client getting a swap file, I'll come to why I also don't like this in a moment. Someone has proposed that we do a block layout implementation where the MDS maintains mapping of blocks to contents. The clients append to the file, and then it tells the MDS to atomically remap the file so that you can, instead of writing in place, you're writing at the end, and then you atomically exchange on the metadata server the contents of the file. And I view this as the least likely to introduce corruption, but I also view it as the way that you do the swap is you have to tell all the clients that have read-write layouts to return those layouts. And so if you have 64,000 of them writing to the same file, you can imagine the world just grinding to a halt. I've also had someone who's done this in the past, and they said they went with locked files, not to do distributed consensus checking. Another problem is with this, you can, the clients grab the byte range locks, and then the big question is how to repair a file at the end if if there's an issue. I won't talk too much about it. I'm missing slides. It must be me. I probably didn't, because I kept.
It's all
on-
you.
No, I kept on saying I'll get to that in a moment, and I haven't gotten to them. So it's all me, Chris, not you. Another solution that's been presented is to have a modified two-touch Paxos algorithm. So Paxos is very chatty. But everyone I've talked to, except for the guy who wants to do Paxos, has said no way. So where's the lack of scaling? The lack of scaling is either in the sheer number of clients that are attending to it or the amount of contention. And this is, I'm sorry. All right, I have my slide. Never mind. And so let's talk about those. I talked about the kernel-based limitation. So a chunk either occupies, let's say at a basic level, either 1K or 4K, depending on the way you set up the coding algorithm. And you would think that if it's a distributed algorithm, there's not going to be a conflict in their byte range, except there really is. And so this slide talks about both client one starting to write in the middle of starts to write from the beginning of the data block to the middle of the data block. Client two is going to write from the middle of the data block to the end of the data block. So what happens when they both try to write it the same block at the same time? You can get either a mixture of the two different the two different solutions, and of course they aren't the solution we want, right? And the classic way to solve this is you let one of the clients win, and then you tell the second client you didn't win, reread the information and regenerate your data. But I just wanted to point out that I brought this slide in from another deck that I presented before, just to point out that there is a basic contention, and you multiply this by the number of clients and by the number of files. And so you have the contention in the chunk, then you have the contention of when you send the chunk on the wire, you might be sending, say, 64K of chunks. And this is not an in-kernel problem. This is a problem on the network. And then on the server, your data blocks to be 4K, 32K, 64 meg, 128 meg. So when you say, oh, I have a problem on chunk number 5, then are you going to overwrite the entire data block, or are you going to overwrite just the value that you have the problem on? And a lot of the solutions that I've seen proposed, or I have proposed, have this problem in them, in that the granularity is too fine on a traditional kernel data server. And so what I'm getting to is that we need a new paradigm where we don't think about blocks, we don't think about bytes, we think about chunks. And that we may be, instead of a solution, so either someone has to be willing to go rewrite their kernel-based server to think about chunks and not blocks, or they have to provide a userland file server on the data server that does this for you. And so when it gets a write from the client, it stores that, and it stores it not as an overwrite, but basically as an append. It has a stack of them, and as reads come in, it pulls not from the data file, but from that list of chunk modifications. And as they are confirmed, they're written to the data file. And I stopped my slides on purpose here because when I start to think of an algorithm as being ugly, I walk away from it. But we need to, what I'll get to is we need to change our model, and we need an approach that does this. And I think Christoph's there, so I can stop.
Okay, Christoph. You was in queue.
Christoph, you there?
I'm there, but I didn't unmute myself. That never helps when you start rambling. So I don't think when you're talking about kernel, it matters. What you're really talking about is like a classic block-based file system, and it doesn't really matter where it's implemented.
Fair enough.
The good news for you is, I mean, what you're basically describing is a file system that does selective logging of writes, and there's a bunch of things that are doing that. The downside is once you do that, you increase your write amplification because you're writing all the data multiple times, right? Once to the log, which I think you called overlay earlier. But it's something that's been done in file systems for a long time and can be done. The question is how well it fits in with what you're doing, because you probably need to do it differently than people are currently doing. And in the end, that's kind of a server implementation detail. What we really need to figure out, what are the right network semantics that would enable an implementation like that?
I agree with you, actually, yes.
And I don't really have a good idea offhand, but I think we should just keep brainstorming to figure out what are good high-level semantics that allow for this. And the whole fact that you do erasure coding across different data servers in a way where clients need to read a coherent view of that is just really complicated, especially without recalling layouts. And maybe we need a more efficient network operation that doesn't recall layout, but updates layouts in a coherent way. And that might reduce the overhead. But basically, any scheme would require either a fair amount of intelligence on the data servers or some form of updating outstanding layouts to put to a new right out of place location.
And I think I'm leaning to updating the data servers to be smarter. I just am. That's where I've been thinking of trying to improve.
And I mean, one way to look into some of this might be to give outstanding layouts generations. So you basically have outstanding layouts, you broadcast a new generation counter that gets sent over the wire to the data servers, which means the data server now needs to look for a new location for the same existing layout. I don't know. I mean, this is wild brainstorming. We should probably do that over a beer when the chance arises.
I'll be kind of chair. Chris?
Thanks. So Chris at the regular contributor line, so no chair hat on. So well, the thing that I kind of thought from what you just said is almost that you're looking for another layer of indirection that it abstracts and the problem is, so you want a layer that abstracts what the data server fundamental storage model looks like, and to be able to use that. But then there's a layer of translation somewhere that has to happen. I don't know if that gets imposed on the client, if that gets imposed on the data server, right? That you then have to coordinate back to there. I mean, to kind of Christoph's other comments there, right? I mean, like that, they could tie together.
Yeah, and I think Christoph also made another interesting observation of we're trying to define new semantics on the wire as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's yes. So Christoph's comment of thinking about it on the wire is where I said, oh, so what we really want. I mean, so some part of what you're saying here is that the layouts that you get from Flex layouts aren't necessarily going to be amenable in all cases to kind of run this algorithm in an efficient way. And the question then becomes, okay, do you put a set of requirements on those data servers such that you can, and then we can define what that on the wire protocol looks like, or do you abstract it out somewhat, and then you potentially get more options as to where you could make the client have to do more work if they don't have a smarter data server, but it gives you an abstraction layer to let you have trade-offs in the implementation potentially. The generation thing for me, I mean, Christoph, you can comment, but for me leans backward or back into almost a Paxos type solution there where.
So I didn't speak to it. There is a generation on.
Oh, I did see that
on
actually.
the right on the chunk that you would be able to tell, but without being purely Paxos.
Right, but it still gives you a line in the sand.
So you have to be able to tell that the blocks on the data server are from the same transaction from one of the clients. So you have to impose a generation number on the right.
So would that be metadata you have to capture on
the data server?
On the data server.
Yes.
Oh, like that's a big.
And remember,
big model change.
You don't have a universal clock across the data servers.
So what is?
So you can encode like a client ID and a timestamp that's pretty granular. These are all details I didn't want to talk about.
I don't want to go into like a full design, like standing at the mic, but understanding what is needed. For me, this helps the what is needed a whole lot.
So I'll talk one more thing about what Christoph said, and I'll let him talk for himself. One of the problems I've had in the past presentations is I think I did focus too much on how will we do this on the data server and not what are the semantics on the wire, right? I mean, when Christoph said that, I was like, oh yeah, this is why I'm talking here today. Christoph, did you have something else? Or is that from before?
The unmute problem again. So another thing, I know we two talked about this, but also for the group, one issue I see is once you do erasure coding, the flex files or files model in general kind of starts to not fit very well anymore, right? So flex files work really well where you redirected an entire file or chunks of a file to certain data servers. It still works really well for mirroring. It works to some extent for striping, but once you don't have entire unencoded chunks of files placed to underlying files on the data server, the fact that you need to have basically a data server file per metadata server file becomes very limiting. I mean, we've been talking about all these right out of place lock data layouts before putting them in place schemes, also the data generation schemes. And all of this doesn't work very well if you have this file ID based address space. And it would work a lot better if you had a flat address space on the client, which is the block SCSI NVMe layout model. It could also be shoehorned into NFS as the access protocol if you basically exported one NFS file ID in a file system and give you the 64-bit flat address space. Because once you do that, you become a lot more flexible about redirecting things. And the other option would be what I mentioned before, would be some sort of file data layout on the wire where each layout basically tells you what data generation you get. And this works okay for NFS, I think, because we've got the close to open semantics. So there is eventual consistency until a file is closed. It would not work very well for POSIX semantics, where other clients are basically expected to see the data immediately. So your layout return would basically force the update of the layouts to the other clients, and preferably with an operation that's less expensive than a layout recall plus a new layout.
All right. No more questions? I think we're done.
That is all that's on the agenda.
Thank
That's the end of the presentation. Any other topics, bashes? I can no longer. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming in NFS. We'll see you on the list. We have a bunch of stuff still to talk about and resolve. And giving you some time back. Use it
I just want
wisely.
to say,
Bye all. Good to see you. Bye bye.
Soren, you're up late. I just want to say, hasta luego, Madrid. Here we come.
That's right. See you. Thanks
Have
for
a good one.
you win the medal for being up in the middle of the night and attending.
Yeah, Soren, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Get to work on that sleep apnea. Okay, take care, guys.
It's not done. They look into that. They will make the change and then they will ask for something. I've seen that.